Hi, welcome to Box Rock and Celluloid, Bot for short. So today I'm going to be looking at the career of Queensryche and just trawling through their albums quickly. So Queensryche formed Seattle 1981, I think, 1980, early 80s. They're actually in a band called The Mob, which is a covers band, and then they mutate into Queensryche and Jeff Tate joins. And they make a self-financed EP. So the original EP's got Queen of the Night Rider, Blinded, and Lady Wore Black on it. And although the production's not great, it is good for a self-financed EP. And Queen of the Reich's a classic power metal track. At this point, Queensryche, you would call them a power metal band. Their image is very kind of like future warrior metal. Lady Wore Black on this album's like a nice ballad. You hear the influence of Maiden and Priest, the two bands that really spring to mind, and then the vocal stylings of Dio. And in that respect, pardon me, Queensryche are like a hybrid. Certainly Jeff Tate is a hybrid of Bruce Dickinson, Halford, and Dio. Those three singers in terms of his tone, his screams, and what he does, and then the musical stylings, Priest, Maiden, and bits of Pink Floyd. Really. So the EP got Night Rider and Blinded. No bad tracks on it. Good fledgling thing. It got reissued. But what comes out early is the writing. DeGarmo and Michael Wilson actually write the tracks on the original EP because Jeff Tate, some of those written before he joined. Then Tate will join the writing axis, and that pretty much you'll get Tate writing with Wilton, Tate writing with DeGarmo writing on his own generally. But it's very rarely they kind of write together. So that's a little sketch of like the EP. Let's get into their album. So the first few I probably won't go into depth much because these will get classic album inspections. There's already one out for Rage for Order. Of course there'll be a Mindcrime one. It may be already out when you read this. And I will do The Warning as well, and Empire eventually. But yeah, The Warning's the debut album full. Sorry, it's back to front. As I always say on these things, I have to be able to see myself to do this. And when I've tried holding up the CDs when the camera's flipped, I just can't line it up. So this album's really grown on me. I mean, I got it when I was... I got Rage for Order and Mindcrime in 89, so I got them like the same day. So I've had those two albums to start with. So when I went back, when I got The Warning eventually around that same time, it was on something called Price Attack, which was EMI's reduced price for their albums, but it had the inner sleeve and everything. I liked it, but it was kind of more, like I said, more power metal and didn't have the production quality of those other two albums. Listening to it now, I've been really fairly binging it recently, and the production, the mix really lets it down. The track Child of Fire is probably the track where if the whole album sounded more like that mix, it would be more satisfying, but the drums are very tepid at times on this album, and the guitars are washed with reverb. But Tate gives an excellent performance, and the songs are really good. I mean, the songs fit into two patterns of lyrics, basically science fiction and sort of fantasy metal. So again, going from the Maiden and particularly the Priest influence on this. Warning's great, and Force, great track, and a Sanctuary. These are really good deep cuts. And then 156, which gets played live a lot. Take Hold of the Flame, probably the classic track on the album. Then you got Before the Storm and Child of Fire, which tracks which I didn't used to like, which are actually really good. And then the epic Roads to Madness at the end, with really cool orchestrations by Michael Kamen. The problem with this was James Guthrie did the production, and then went with him because he did Judas Priest, Killing Machine, and he co-produced the Wall album by Pink Floyd. But I don't think he's a great metal producer. I think it was a mistake. That would have been better with like a Tom Allen or maybe even self-producing with a good engineer. And then the mixing got handed over to a guy called Val Gallery, and it didn't sound great. But it's got a bonus track, The Prophecy, on the 2003 issue, and that's a track written at this time, but it's produced by Neil Kernon. That kind of shows what this album would sound like if Neil Kernon, who did Rage for Order, produced the album. But quite epic, 48 minutes long, this album. But I call it a classic power metal album that fits into the power metal genre. It's very popular with European metal fans. Although it's popular with American metal fans, the bigger albums would be more well known. The other things went $300,000 over budget, and I think that fact probably created problems for Queensryche down the line. I think Queensryche were a band that probably ended up, you know, in a financial quagmire a little bit. Their albums are expensive, and it started with this. That's a lot of money then, that's going over budget, so God knows what it cost. And then you got Ryche, this one of my favourite albums of all time. Just classic. Again, if I'll put my classic album review of this in the footnotes of this, and you can find out all about that there. There's no point in me going on about it massively in this segment, because there's a more in-depth look, but it's no bad tracks on it for me. Incredible production, brilliant lyrics, let down by their awful Ray Brown costumes and lipstick and the terrible image of the time. They kind of undid them. Again, this would be an expensive record. So Queensryche really needed to hit big. Around this time, they're doing a lot of really good supports. They support Dio quite a lot. I forget what other supports they got, but you know, they got out and about and were doing well. It's a gold record, this, as is The Warning in America, so eventually they're sold. So they come to Mindcrime. Again, everyone knows this album. I'll put a classic album inspection in the footnotes when that finally appears. So again, I'll go into more depth in that. There's an all-time classic, the greatest heavy metal concept album of all time. Incredible production with Peter Collins, although it's quite hard on the ears, very digital. I think what you hear on this album is they start to abandon some of the metal elements. Rage for Order's like a kind of sci-fi, kind of souped up metal version of their Warning sound. So those two albums join together, and then the Rage for Order production style and so on fits into Mindcrime. But I think Warning and Mindcrime don't have a lot of similarity between them. Maybe apart from Road to Madness being a bit epic. Yeah, I mean, Chris DeGarmo, Jeff Tate, Michael Wilton. What's prevalent on this is the fact that Wilton actually writes quite a bit. He gets 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 co-writes, and he writes 2 tracks, Speak and Spreading the Disease, with Tate alone. I think what this album benefits from, which there's not actually as much on Ray for, is up-tempo tracks. You've got Speak, you've got Spreading the Disease, you've got The Needle Lies, and that's Michael Wilton bringing in those, and those more energised tracks work really well. When those aren't there, Queensryche can fall into mid-tempo land, and that's fine, but you get too much of that, which is what will happen later on. It's not as interesting. The commercial elements come into this, the ability, the need to write a hit comes into this, and I think with the concept, with this album, I think they've kind of got I Don't Believe in Love there at the end of the album to kind of get a kind of that type of lyric in. If I'm honest, I've always felt that. That more commercial element, is going to kind of spring into Empire. So again, Empire's an album that's got nothing in common with Warning or Rage for Order, but it's got something in common with Mindcrime. So you can see these little joins here. So Empire's the next one. This is their biggest album. This goes triple platinum in the US. I think it sells about 4 million copies worldwide. I really like the album, but it's my least favourite of these first 4 because of its more commercial. A long record, 63 minutes, great production, the best sounding Queensryche album. I think the title tracks and Silent Lucidity are the best tracks on it. Silent Lucidity, Grammy winning song, I think. Written by Chris DeGarmo, and that's probably paid his pension. It's probably why he doesn't have to be in the band anymore, because it keeps paying out, I'd imagine. Best I Can, excellent opener, and then The Thin Line, really good. Jet City Woman, commercial track, but I really like it. And then Della Brown, really good. Scott Rockenfield co-wrote on this. Track 5, Another Rainy Night Without You, a kind of wimpier track. I do like the verse, chorus, but a bit soft. You know, they maybe could have lost one of these tracks on this album. You know, 11 tracks is more than enough. Empire's great. Resistance, again, this is kind of a catchy song about the environment. I just prefer something more aggressive. Obviously, Silent Lucidity classic, and Hand on Heart, another kind of wimpier track, which I'm not fussed about. And then it finished off with Two Corkers, One and Only, which is a kind of boy-girl falling in love lyric, but it's got great time signatures and riffing on it. And then Anybody Listening is the kind of top epic track to finish with some lovely samples. Again, there'll be a more in-depth review of this. But, you know, 4 classic albums on the track by Queensryche. At this point, they're one of the big bands in the world. They're kind of not getting caught up in the hair metal thing. They're kind of beating that. They're kind of somewhere between the alternative rock that's coming and getting popular and the hair metal it's been. So they're in a good position. But basically the tour for Empire is massive. I mean, it takes 16 months, it's exhausting. And then they need a long break after, and they're all getting married. So it's probably too long a break to this next album, but I think it's a really good record. I always thought it was a strong record. And there's elements of this I actually prefer to Empire in that I don't think it's as compromised. But it's The Promised Land. There you go, sorry, back front. A shorter record, it's only 48 minutes, so going back to Warning length, 11 tracks. It actually opens with just a short instrumental, which is fairly pointless really. It's not like Hellion or something. And then you're into the album. I think what you notice with this is where the mid and slow tempo thing comes in. And every Queensryche album will suffer from this problem afterwards. The other problem with this album is it maybe feels like a collection of songs rather than having a cohesive vision. I think that kind of shows the disconnect in the band at the time. They basically went to an album with James Jimbo Barton, to an island with James Jimbo Barton to record in log cabins. But Chris DeGarmo, I think Tate stayed on the island at the time, and the other Jackson, Rottenfield and Wilton were kind of going back onto the shore, as it were. So it didn't bring the cohesion in the group. They were trying to reconnect. I think the other problem around this time, I believe Jeff Tate was in the throes of the divorce. I can't remember, but there was problems. But I think the way the Queensryche operation was set up, it made them kind of culpable for payments to his ex-wife. And I could be wrong about this, but I know they'd done all this hard work, and then this put an extra financial pressure or strain on them. And I think that's possibly part of that will be what would have caused Chris DeGarmo to go later on, I think, but not strictly that way. But I Am I is a brilliant track, really cool. Then Damaged, two brilliant openers, and then Out of Mind, actually, a lovely acoustic track. The album starts really strong there. Bridge, nice DeGarmo. I mean, here, sorry, there's more, like DeGarmo writes 1, 2, 3 tracks on his own, then DeGarmo and Tate write 3 again. There's not as much collaboration. Michael Wilton only gets 1 co-write, and I think that shows. It kind of needs some Wilton in there. But anyway, Bridge, nice acoustic track, not as keen on this. Then you've got Promised Land, which is an interesting epic track with saxophone. Very slow, very introspective. Jeff Tate musing on what it's like to be successful, achieving the American dream, reaching the Promised Land, but finding it's not what you thought and you're not as happy as you thought you'd be. But a good track, but not a great track. And then you got Disconnected. This comes late in the day. This is actually Rottenfield and Tate together. I really like this track. It's kind of got a kind of sample feel. It's kind of technological. Really cool guitars on this, kind of U2-ish, distorted sort of phase sounds. I really like it. Then you got Lady Jane, and this, I would say, you know, up until now the album's had some kind of shape. Now Lady Jane's a really good track, but it kind of feels slightly out of kilter. It's a kind of piano track, but it's a good song. Then you got My Global Mind. This is a little more commercial. This feels more like an Empire track. I would say the tracks before this, apart from Bridge, they don't feel like tracks that could go on Empire or anything before in some respects. Maybe Damage, maybe Am I, perhaps. But My Global Mind's kind of commercial. I really like it, but it feels like an Empire track. And then One More Time's the same, another good track, well written, DeGarmo Tate, but feels more Empire-y. So it's kind of that, like I said, a lack of cohesion. Then you got Someone Else, which is a piano ballad, which is good. I prefer the piano ballad till the actual band version, which you can get as a bonus track. So this is a really good record. It just lacks cohesion, but it's got lots of good songs on it. But they find themselves in this difficult situation. This album makes number 3, it goes platinum, but it's nothing like the sales of the previous albums. And they drop this right in the middle of the Seattle peak. I mean, this is the year Kurt Cobain dies. Soundgarden peaking, Nirvana profile's massive, Pearl Jam's profile's massive. So they do well. They're not caught up with the hair metal thing. The hair metal bands who release albums in 94, 95, even 93 will experience huge problems, and Dream Theater are doing quite well at this point, although not as well with the Awake album. But it's difficult for Queensryche to place themselves, and again there'll be a longish gap until the next album, which is Here and Now Frontier. Again, this album does pretty well. It actually sold 330,000 copies, but nothing like what it sold before. they sold before. I think the problem with this album is, first port of call, they go for a grungy production. Promised Land's got a more stripped down production, but it has polish. This has got no polish on it. It's a cool cover, actually, if you look at it properly the right way around. And this has got too many tracks. It's got 14 tracks on it, and some are really good, some aren't good. Again, it's a bit of a mismatch. I don't dislike. I think the last time I listened to it, which was pretty recently, I was kind of less moored with it. But A Sign of the Times and Cuckoo's Nest are really good. Cuckoo's Nest got a great chorus. Again, most of these compositions are DeGarmo 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. DeGarmo on his own, then DeGarmo and Tate writing 4, and then a few other co-writes, only one Wilton credit. Again, the mid-tempo coming in, everything's mid-tempo. I think, like you can see, DeGarmo's writing's moving in a different direction. Get a Life's not great, the voice inside's good, Some People Fly's good, a bit slow and dirgy. Saved, good robust track. You, it's alright. Hero, again, quite a cool track, but a little slow and introspective, like Some People Fly. Miles Away, great chorus on that. Ryche, not into that. And then you've got this weird track, All I Want, which Chris DeGarmo does vocals on that. At the time they did this, Chris DeGarmo was like, well, Jeff, do you want to sing this? And Jeff Tate was like, well, I'm not fussed, you sing it if you want. And there was in that period where they weren't going to fight for something, and we're kind of like, like being laissez-faire about stuff. And so that's kind of strange. Quite a good track. Then 2 poor tracks, Hit the Black and Anytime Anywhere. I mean, Hit the Black's kind of heavy, and the album needs an art track like that. It's just not good enough. This is DeGarmo, Eddie Jackson. Just doesn't need these 2 tracks. The album would be a lot better with removing those tracks, and probably All I Want, or maybe Ryche or something. All the tracks on this album, bar a couple, are kind of under... Well, many of them are under 4 minutes. There's a couple, 3 over 4 minutes. There's one under 2, but it's quite short. So even though you've got 14 tracks, 57 minutes, 4 minute average. Then it finishes with Spool, which is really good. This is kind of like a Floydy, sort of nice hypnotic beat. Definitely one of the best tracks on the album. I give this album a coffin splutter to a 6 out of 10. You kind of just need to make a playlist out of it. You can lose, easily lose 4 of these tracks, 5 or 6, and you've got a better listening experience. So after this, Queensryche tried to go on tour. The record company EMI goes bust. They actually got bought up by a guy called Guy Hands at a hedge fund group, I think. This means Queensryche didn't have funding for their tour, which shows their situation. This is a band that's had 3 platinum albums on the track, but they still need tour support. They have to fund the tour themselves, and again that adds to the financial woes that I think at the end of this, DeGarmo's like, well, I've taken this as far as I can. He actually leaves and becomes an airline pilot, and he will briefly come back to write some songs, but it's never the same after this. So the band's really in turmoil. This album sold 353,000 copies, but like a lot of bands in the 90s who played what we call traditional metal, although Queensryche stretched out of that way before, they just find themselves not doing as well. So they switched to the Atlantic label just for one album for Q2K and getting a guy called Kelly Gray, who's a friend of Jeff Tate's. And this is where real problems will start for the band, because Jeff Tate will start picking the guitarist he works with, and he will kind of seize creative control. It just says all tracks written by Queensryche. Problem with this album is production's not great. It's got too many alternative elements, coming at a time when they need to be pushing with kind of, look, we're going into the 2000s and seeing where things will go. But the songs, the last track, The Right Side of My Mind, that's a really good Queensryche track. And if I played you that, you'd be like, yeah. But the rest of the album's just, not great. Sacred Ground's alright. Burning Man's quite good. I quite like the rhythm on that. But it's kind of an album without direction. This is what happens when key members leave, like Judas Priest lost Rob Halford, Iron Maiden lost Bruce Dickinson, and Queensryche lost Chris DeGarmo, their creative engine, or one of the creative engines. So that's that, and then there's a big gap again. September 14th, then they take 4 years nearly to release Tribe. This album comes out, not a good cover, not good branding. This is just before traditional metal's just starting to make a comeback. Dio, Maiden, Priest, stuff like that. So they're just out of the cycle with this. Chris DeGarmo comes in and does some co-writing. He co-writes Open, he co-writes Falling Behind, and he co-writes The Art of Life and Doing Fine. Open's an excellent track. If you got this album, you put that track on, you'd be like, oh, really excited, and then it just tails off. They're falling into the mid-tempo thing. It's a short record, only 41 minutes, very short for a Queensryche record. Losing myself, so Desert Dances, okay. Falling Behind's a good track, good DeGarmo take composition. The Great Divide, Michael Wilton. In actual fact, Michael Wilton coming in on the co-writing again here. Then you got Rhythm of Hope, Tribe, Blood, The Art of Life. This album's kind of like a 4 or 5 out of 10. It's better than Q2K. It's just lacking, you know, apart from that opening track, it's just lacking that really killer songs that we need. So things, you know, basically now they need to get back on track. Metal's kind of back more, and they decide to do a sequel to Operation Mindcrime. My feeling is that Tate had a lot of the songs, and then he decided to make it a Mindcrime sequel. The shape of this album, the lengths of the songs, it doesn't mirror the first album. It doesn't have an epic like Sweet Sister Mary. It's got 17 tracks, and there's a weird track called Convict, which is just 8 seconds. There's a guy called Jason Slater on guitar production, and when Queensryche went to court later on, which we'll come to, Jason Slater was one of the names coming up, and principally the songs were written by Jason Slater, Mike Stern, and Jeff Tate most of the time. Michael Wilton hardly anything to do with it, and the truth of the matter is Michael Wilton played hardly any guitar on this, and you can actually hear that when the harmonies are going, I think. It's just like the rest of the band's just lost interest. When this album came out, I really liked it was up to a track called The Chase, which is, it does a duet with Dio. Generally, I thought, oh, there's good tracks there. Then there was Murderous Circles, and then it just started to tail off. But when I listened to it recently, it's not that great. I'm American's all right, you know, gets things going. You got One Foot in Hell, Hostage, The Hands, and they're pretty good. Speed of Light, Signs Say No. Rearrange, he's got a great chorus, but the problem on this album is a lot of the riffs are just moving power chords. There's none of the intricate riffs you expect from Queensryche. You know, DeGarmo and Wilton do those and rolling sort of triplet type riffs and interesting chord voicings. Sometimes these things appear. The other thing is there's a lot of programming of strings. The string sounds aren't great, so sample kind of technology for strings isn't great in the 90s. Listen to the difference between The Odyssey by Symphony X from 2002 and one of the more recent albums. You can hear the difference there. So this album gets pretty good reviews, but the production's not great. It's got trashy cymbals, it lacks depth, and it just tails off. It's just not interesting. They did a show where they played the Mindcrime album and this album back to back, and I didn't see it, but you know, it made sense doing this just to kind of get them out there a bit more. And then strange enough, they do a covers album, take cover, and then they do a American Soldier, another concept album. And I think this is better than Mindcrime 2, funnily enough. But again, it's Kelly Gray's back on rhythm guitar, Jason Slater's producing. All songs written by Jason Slater and Jeff Tate, except Scott Rockenfield. Michael Wilt and Eddie Jackson do nothing. I suspect the play, certainly Michael Wilt hardly plays on this. So very strange. This is where the mid-tempo, every song in this is slow or mid-tempo. There's just nothing upbeat. And it really suffers from that. And then he has a duet with his daughter who's about 10 on the 11th track, Home Again, which is a nice song, but the vocal's not good enough. And it shows like Tate's got too much control, I think. But I like him, 100 Mile Stare. 30,000 Feet's good. Middle of Hell, If I Were King, a bit pitchy, the vocals. Yeah, Unafraid. It's got some good tracks. I think it's certainly as good as Mindcrime too. But again, just the problems in the band, and they will really start to come to a head on the next album, dedicated to Chaos. Most bands have an album that fans don't like, and you think, why did they do that? But even someone like Judas Priest, you know, some great tracks on Nostradamus, some great tracks on Turbo and Ram It Down. Iron Maiden with Blaze, you know, there's good songs. This album's just, it's like a Jeff Tate solo album. There's just nothing Queensryche about it. Some people like it. I saw them live actually. There was supporting Judas Priest on Nostradamus tour, and they just looked really tired. They looked tired through their classics. It came to a head. Jeff Tate had too much control. He fell out of the rest of the band. The rest of the band went out as Rising West and found Todd La Torre. And then there was this big court case. And a lot of stuff came out in the court case about how little Michael Wilton was playing on stuff, how much Jeff Tate was doing. I think him and Rockenfield had a good relationship, but then they fell out. You can probably read about that. But the band was in turmoil. And you got a weird thing where you got two Queensryche albums out at the same time because the legal rights to the name wasn't agreed. But Queensryche officially became Queensryche. With Todd La Torre did this album, Queensryche. So the guitarist on this, Chris DeGarmo, never came back. I forget the name of him. Parker Lundgren, who does an okay job. This album's actually worth getting. I bought this because Todd does a great job. If there's a problem with this album, it's because I had to rush it because they wanted to get it out before Jeff Tate, which they just managed to, I think. It doesn't quite have enough tracks. It's only 35 minutes long, so again, it feels like a collection of songs. And there's a couple of instrumentals which are just padding, really. You've literally got 33 minutes of music, but the songs are good as Where Dreams Go to Die, Spore's really good. Spore's like a kind of Rage for Order type track. In this, like Redemption, Vindication's really good. World Without You, Don't Look Back, Fall Out are kind of quicker, heavier tracks, and Open Road, a really cool ballad on the end. Mastering's ridiculously loud. I mean, achievement with James Jimbo Barn. It's got the classic Queens like snare and sound, and he used the Roland James C amps. I forget the name of them now. The chorus amps that would get their famous clean sound from. But the mastering's so loud on this, ridiculously loud. But it is a good record. I'd give it a 7 out of 10. Like, all it needed really was lose the instrumentals and write 2 more tracks if they had enough time. I've never listened to the Jeff Tate Queensryche one. And then he comes off Operation Mindcrime and went off and did that. And then they did Condition Human. I didn't like this as much. It was less melodic. But Arrow of Time was really good, the title track. They were kind of bringing in sort of developing the sound more. There's lots of different co-writes on this, and I think that's good. The whole band's involved on this. But I preferred it to the most recent one. A lot of people love The Verdict, but there wasn't enough there wasn't enough hooks for me on it. Todd La Torre actually played drums in this as well, and Scott Rockenfield's left now, and I don't know if he's coming back. So you only have 2 members of the classic Queensryche. But I have caught them live, and they are superb live. Principally on the back of Todd. The drummer's really good they've got, and Todd La Torre is a great front, and he can do all the classic Queensryche. So you get a metal Queensryche show, the first 4 albums. If I'm honest, if I went to see Queensryche now, I'd be happy if they just played tracks off The Warning and Rage for Order. I've seen Mindcrime played live. I've seen them on the Empire tour at Promised Land. I've seen all that stuff. They just said we're going to play the EP, Warning and Rage for Order. That would be great. But that's Patrol through their albums. Other people would disagree. But Queensryche certainly tailed off after '94, and so once Chris DeGarmo left, they've never got back. They've got back the sound with Todd La Torre, but they never quite got the creativity back, for me anyway. But a classic band nonetheless. Cheers, thanks.